Hey guys, I'm back. Anyway, I'm sorry yesterday I didn't get on and do chapter 3. It was crazy. I'm sure everyone can relate to a crazy day. But I'm here to read both chapter 3 and chapter 4. So it's a double chapter feature. If we are reading my book, Beldagar, A Dark Eve Story. Woo! Okay. You can get your own copy if you want it on Amazon, or you can go to my website. The link is included in this video. So, Beldagar, if you haven't tuned in, go back. There's other videos for chapter 1 and chapter 2. Is again from book 3 is where we first see him. And right now, brand new books that are out are Animar Warrior, which is book 4. Very awesome read. And book of Soliticus, which is a little thriller that goes along with it. You're going to want to read both at the same time. So go ahead and go snag those on Amazon for me. And we will start with chapter 3. Chapter 3. Sorry. Right there. Ooh! Ah, sorry. Okay. Chapter 3. Rose. 9 years later. And 3 days before his 20th birthday, Beldagar walked obliviously home from the mines. The day was bright with fluffy white clouds puffing through the sky. The tops of the tall pines swayed gently. His shaggy brown hair hung past his ears. He brushed it back and felt the energy of the earth bursting beneath him. Maybe it was because it was the only thing he paid attention to, but he swore he could feel nature all around him. Every day his life was the same. He never saw an end to it, but he could also never think beyond it. Whenever he tried to imagine a life away from here, on his own, with maybe a wife, children, and home, it just felt empty. As he passed the small stone and mud houses of the village, extra commotion buzzed in the center. He darted around a wooden shed and skidded in the mud. He peered out to a steady stream of individuals building booths and hauling lumber. Dozens of baskets and crates. Every 3 years there was a festival. He had hardly ever attended. For him, attending meant watching elusively from a distance. The nights would be dressed with lanterns and dripping candles. The livestock would arrive and be put in pens. Soon the songs which he only partly knew would be sung. Then the villagers would go up to the very top of the mountain. Beldagar glanced up. The crowning clouds that always appeared above the pinnacle looked pinker and happier. He scanned the village center until his eyes caught the back of a woman. She sat on a stump under the birch tree on the side of the festival. Her golden blonde hair spiraled down her back, and a green-leafed crown sat on her head. She was dressed in a white pleated Greek dress that adhered to her figure. Beldagar's mind pulled, and his feet naturally obeyed. He stepped closer. His heart skipped. His feet did less walking, more like stumbling, and all the while he could hardly breathe as a deep anticipation built in his gut. She sat alone, looking at the ground. He had to sneak around several of the tents, always searching for a glimpse of her along the way. He hoped that no one would notice him. All he needed was for word to get back to the nag or thard. He never quite understood why he was not able to attend the festivals, except that it was only for those worthy of it. He obviously was not. As he moved quietly around the birch trees, the woman glanced elsewhere. He slipped out in front of her only 5 steps away. Her face was young, near his age. Her peachy skin looked soft. She turned back to him with piercing crystal blue eyes. The direct contact was exhilarating. It only lasted for seconds before she diverted to the ground, away from his stare. It was the same as lightning striking his head and traveling to the tips of his toes. For a moment he was dizzy, and a swirl of colors flooded his vision. He stood there, staring down awkwardly at her, wishing that she would look up and say something. He searched for the words to fill the gap between them. Maybe it would be better if he just left. But even the uncomfortable weight of standing near her felt better than leaving. The thought of leaving was almost unbearable. "What's your name?" He felt like his insides would burst, making him shift his weight constantly. Her dainty eyelashes flickered up at him and then back to the ground. Her perfectly full, pinked lips were pouted and motionless. He waited for her to say something, anything, but she didn't. She stared at the ground in her beautiful white dress. He told himself to turn and walk away, and even willed his feet to move. But he never did. Instead, he stood there waiting for her to speak, even though he felt the fool for doing it. He shifted his weight again, and his foot moved to catch a quick step. "What does it matter what my name is?" Her eyes once again darted up, but this time she looked to the top of the mountain before resuming her staring at the ground. Beldagar turned to the mountain and then to all the banners and tents going up for the festival. "Rose," she said quietly. "Rose," he repeated. It was perfect for her. A strange tingling tickled his mind, a sense of déjà vu. She sat like a statue. He could see the two of them in the small area of trees, and the world spun around their frozen figures. "Did you come for the festival?" He knew the answer already, but could not come up with anything else to say. She was not from the village. The surrounding settlements flooded in for the festival of the mountain every 3 years. At previous festivals, he recalled seeing a line of women wearing the same white togas and green leafy crowns. They held candles in their hands, the flickering glow illuminating their faces. He remembered thinking that they were beautiful, more beautiful than he had ever seen. But he had not been affected in any way, not like this. "Don't you know anything?" Rose folded her arms. She shifted her face toward him. He silently absorbed her anger, weighed with all of his apologies. He wished he had paid more attention to things, but his mind felt too open to control. "I'm not allowed to come to the festivals. The people I stay with have a lot of things for me to do." He searched for more words to excuse his lack of knowledge, but couldn't come up with anything. She looked up to him. Her expression was not angry, but the deep sadness in her blue eyes made him want to crumble. She nodded slowly, sympathizing. "They're not your family?" He shook his head, and she took a deep breath. After a second of contemplation, she moved over a bit and motioned him to sit next to her. Sheer panic rushed through him. Why would she allow him to sit next to her? But his feet moved, and he sat down beside her as though it were completely natural. She reached over and grabbed his hand. He didn't know why she would do such a thing. "Did you know your family?" He shook his head again. I was dropped off on their doorstep as a baby, with only my name to claim me, Beldagar." He had imagined the scene so many times, his chubby baby self wrapped up in a blanket in a hand-woven basket placed on the small stone porch. She mouthed his name and squinted. "I belong to the mountain," she said softly. Her quick glance sent sparks up his spine. What does that mean? I don't quite know. I just know that I'll never come down again once they lead me up. No one who's prepared for the festival of the mountain ever comes back down. The ladies holding candles, their green crowns and sheer white veils made them heavenly. A deep wrongness flooded him. What happened on top of the mountain if every 3 years they went up and never came down? Worry for her grew in his gut. He stood instantly, Rose jolted back from his movement. He flushed, embarrassed by his suddenness, and diverted his attention to the grand mountain. The workers, putting up the stands and tables, all looked like the enemy now. It's probably best you go, Rose said. I'm not supposed to be around other people. He looked back at her, almost unable to leave until he spotted Thard's stern face approaching. He glanced at her one more time and gave a worried smile. I'll come back, I promise. He felt the words stronger than anything before. Even his fears were small compared to his promise as he bolted back home. So that is chapter 3. We have our interesting mountain festival coming up, and we have met our Lady Rose. So we're going to move to chapter 4, the mountain. One thing I really like about a story is that everything can have a story. Even something solitary as a mountain can have a story. And so if any of you are writers or trying to be writers, make sure that you look at everything, every aspect, and think what history you can give it. Because the more history that you have for a character, a person, a place, the more magical your story can be. Just a quick tip. That was my commentary for chapter 3. All right, chapter 4, the mountain. Beldagar ran up the dirt path, jumping on the single stone porch and through the door. The nag stood at the stove with mounds of vegetables around her. Oh, you're here. Her sarcastic relief rang clear. Where did you decide to get lost to today? I need more wood, and that means you get to cut it like you said you would last week. But as we both can see, there is no more wood in here than there was before. Beldagar looked to the side wall, half full with wood. What happens on the mountain? He blurted to stop any more of her complaining. His question caught her off guard. She half squinted. It was true he wasn't the questioning or conversation type, or maybe it was his desperate voice. What happens on the mountain? What happens on the mountain? She puffed the air out of her lips and threw her hands up as she walked to the back of the kitchen. I need to know. A girl's life might be in danger. The nag turned back around, unimpressed. You'll never know what goes on up the mountain. Only the holy and worthy go there. They do whatever they want with what goes up. I've heard that some they sacrifice and others go to the priests. And well, we all know what happens there. Whatever it may be, it doesn't involve you. Have you ever gone up? His point was clear. She was far from holy and worthy. Every 3 years, we send up crops, livestock, and the young and beautiful to prevent our destruction. I wish you were one of those. She contorted her ugly face at him. The problem with the nag's words was that he could not trust them. She lied and threatened so much that everything was far-fetched. He took a step back and stared at her, seeing her for the disgusting human she was. He had never really considered that he had any other choice than to help her, but something new pounded inside him. Today he felt different. Everything was changing, a refreshing awakening in his mind. He had no loyalty towards Maud. Any connections melted with her words, with her caustic words. For the first time, he was alive, flooded with the urge to leave and never come back. No matter what happened, it would be better than staying. The expression on his face must have sat wrong with her, because she squinted with suspicion. Wood, she jerked her chin towards the door. There was no way he was going to chop wood for someone who had plenty already. He bolted out the door, past the wood-cutting stump. The nag yelled something after him, but he didn't hear it. The lush green forest that he loved flew past his vision. His heart raced wildly, and his feet barely touched the ground. For several minutes, he savored this new feeling, vowing to keep it forever. He would finally be the master of his own destiny. The air whipped past his face until a bright green light glinted through the trees, causing him to skid to a halt. The light was too low to be the sun. It was almost like a falling star, despite its color. He looked back to the place where it had appeared and noticed long indents in the ground from where he had stopped. He bent down, inspecting the deep marks. Squinting, he shook his head. A soft voice whispered in the air around him, "Beldagar." He turned, a shiver rushing down his back, but only the forest answered his vision. "Beldagar," the voice murmured again, but this time he could tell the direction. He spun to where he saw the light. Tall white birches spanned the area. Hesitantly, he inched through the trees to a meadow scattered with grass and wildflowers. There was nothing unusual. The sun gleamed through the trees, warming him. He let his head fall back, basking in the heat, and closed his eyes. Rose's face was etched there. He let out a deep, relaxing breath. "Beldagar," the voice demanded. He jumped, spinning around, expecting to see nothing again. This time, a tall woman with black hair leaned against a tree. He shook his head, trying to dispel the madness. He always experienced voices, but now there was an actual person. The slender woman wore a black velvet dress embellished with dark green satin. She eyed him with a strange glow behind her emerald eyes. He squinted, sensing something familiar in the shape of her face. Familiar the way Rose was, like a picture painted on the back of his mind, but only illuminated in the moment. Her long black hair swayed in the wind, reaching all the way down her back. She jerked her chin away, her eyes narrowed. He pulled his head back. "Do I know you?" She took a calming breath. "Do you know who you are?" A smirk climbed one side of her mouth. "Oh, Beldagar, you never change." She straightened and ventured past him into the meadow. He turned with her movement. "Wait, how do you know my name?" "I'm here to help you, Beldagar," she said. "Help me?" "How are you going to help me?" His simple mindset couldn't grasp anyone wanting to help him. "Yes, help you." Her eyes appeared genuine, but a guarded feeling stopped him. She hadn't answered his questions. "I'll start by telling you the truth." Her expression was blank, but the statement gained his attention. "You are exceptional, Beldagar. You were placed here for a very special reason." Questions flooded him, but he hesitated. "Don't you have something important to do?" she asked, widening her eyes faintly. Panic overwhelmed him, erasing his previous thoughts. She coaxed him by lifting her eyebrows. "To save Rose," she suggested. Rose. He hadn't forgotten about Rose, but now he was suspicious. "I have to save Rose? But who are you? And how do you know her? And why are you helping me?" She tilted her head, staring at him. Her slow movements and piercing eyes made him want to turn away. There was something intimidating about her, yet it felt natural as well. He examined her closely, trying to figure out what about her bothered him. She appeared calm and didn't move or twitch a lot like he did. "Don't you want to save Rose?" She blinked several times, waiting for him to reply. "Well," he started, thinking before answering. She wasn't reciprocating any answers to questions either. "I don't really know if Rose needs to be saved. I don't know what happens on the mountain." He thought of all the horrible things portrayed over the years about monsters and sacrificing people to them. It was all scare tactics before, but now the nag had added details about the priests, and that those who went up never came down. He had no idea what was true. The lady took a deep breath before continuing. "That is why I'm here." Good. She was going to answer some questions. He waited for more. "I'm here to help you save her." "How?" He paused, stuttering through the questions in his mind. He was going to say mother. It was the best explanation for the hag. But in the end, the word couldn't claim her. "The woman that I board with says they sacrifice them to the gods in the mountain, that every 3 years they have to do this, or horrible things will happen." The lady rolled her eyes. "There is no god in the mountain. It's a great dragon." Beldagar drew his head back in disbelief, but hesitated. He had worked in the mines. He had seen and heard things that made him believe that a dragon could live in there, except that he was the only one. "I've worked in those mines most of my life. I would have seen a dragon. Not this one." She shied her head mysteriously from him. "He is calcified." Calcified? The word boggled his mind. "He has become the mountain." Become the mountain? He looked at the stony peak above the treetops. The mountain was majestic. He stood there not understanding what he was to do. "Beldagar," her voice once again pulled his attention back. "Dragons are attracted to one thing." Her green eyes glowed strangely as she talked. "They love gold and metals of the earth. The raw materials become part of them when they consume them. The iron seeps into the sinews of their armor. Copper is conducted into their organs and nerves." Beldagar's vision went fuzzy as he imagined the monstrous beast fitted exactly the way she described. "Gold is a most precious and pure metal that helps their blood to flow. They actually eat it, and that is why gold looks so veined within the stone." He listened to every word. When a dragon has hibernated for long enough without moving on its treasure trove, it turns into stone. The heart will still beat and consume the life source, preserving it as an egg. Much like a phoenix, it will have its rebirth. Its last heartbeat will turn into an egg full of life, but trapped in the mountain's facade. She slowly and quietly looked up to the jagged peak. "You see that this one must have been large and curled tight, making the formation jut into the sky." Her relishing voice echoed in his ears as she lifted her hand and waved it gently to the curve of the summit. She paused and peered back at him with a heavy stare. He wanted to turn away. Instead, he looked over her shoulder to the mountain. She did not stop staring at him as she continued. "They have taken a lot of precious stone from within, and the life of the dragon can sense it." Panic rushed over him as he imagined a dragon waking and cracking the mountain in twain, causing it to fall onto the foothill village. "You have 2 days until Rose goes up to the mountain, and if she does, she will never come down." Her hair gently fanned with the wind, but besides that, her every feature was so motionless that Beldagar could have sworn she was a statue. He could hardly tell that she was breathing. On top of that, they're getting close to the heart of the dragon. Her voice was like the wind, chilling his arms and legs. The thought of Rose leaving and never coming back weighed like an anvil against his chest. This confused him. He had barely met her, yet he felt unequivocally bonded to her. His whole frame tightened. What am I to do? Her face was firm and tight. I can help you. How? The word blurted from his lips. One side of her smile curved up at his desperation. I can give you the strength that you'll need to take down the false priests of the mountain and save her from the waking dragon. How? His hands tightened. He clenched his eyes for a brief second. She tightened her lips in frustration, a reaction he was used to from all those years with the nag. I have magic. Her eyes glowed, illuminating their emerald color. His heart fluttered, and he felt like he was missing a very important piece of information, one that stared him in the face, but that he couldn't pinpoint. Who are you, and why would you do this for me? I am a sorceress, she said, walking a few steps away. I have great power, but there are some things that I cannot do. I am cursed. Beldagar swung around her. Cursed? She seems like a nice woman. There is a family that lives 20 miles north of here. She paused, casting her eyes to the ground. This, she waved her hand toward the top of the mountain and back to the foothill village, is all they're doing. They have caused all this evil and must be stopped. I learned this, and they cursed me to never be able to touch them. I have tried to warn others, but they do not believe. So every 3 years, it all happens again. He digested the story, but didn't quite grasp it. Why do they not live on the mountain? They take all the gold from the mines and live a rich life and feed everyone the lies that make them work to their will. It keeps everyone in check. Don't you see? Don't you see? He repeated her question in his mind. No, I don't see. 1,000 thoughts ran through his head every day, demanding attention. Familiar moments recurred so often that it stumped him. It wasn't that these things were hard to grasp. They were already grasped and replayed routinely. What must I do? His question brought a small, hopeful smirk to her face. I can give you the power to transform yourself into a great warrior. You'll have the strength of 1,000 men and the ability to scale the mountain in seconds. All that I ask is that you destroy the family that has done this to me and the people. At the word destroy, Beldagar's stomach lurched and his eyes widened. A cough blustered out of his mouth. I know what you're thinking. It's a hard thing to ask. I cannot be free until they are dead, and neither can the village or the people. She took both of his shoulders. It is a heavy burden for you to bear. Beldagar stepped back from her grip, and soaked in her request. He had to save Rose and he had to save Rose, and a dragon would soon awake, killing all the people. But he could not kill, could he? He grew more aware of the surrounding forest. He had played in it all his life. The leaves scattering to the ground gently rustled, and the smell of the fall, firm pines filtered into his senses. It was the only escape from his adoptive prison. His heart sunk at the thought of everything being destroyed. The people had never cared for him. They hated him. Yet he sunk inside, sorry for their deaths. The sun drew close to the mountain. Soon the colorful sunset would blaze through the sky. He looked at her firmly. I want to know who you are and how you know me. She stared at him solemnly. I knew your mother. He sucked in his breath. We were as close as two people could be and not be sisters. She had a vision about you and what influence you would have on the world, but she died in childbirth. She made me promise to place you in this town. She said it was important that you grew up here and lived next to this mountain. You were meant to save this village and her. He knew she was talking about Rose, but still didn't get how she was involved. And Rose? She's your soulmate, she said sadly. I have watched over you your entire life. You are important, Beldagar. You are meant to free this people and me. It was destined long before you were born. He looked up to find her walking back to the birch trees. Her figure glimmered in the fading sunlight, disappearing before his eyes like a ghost. The wind picked up, spinning the loose leaves in a torrent around her. When the small storm cleared, falling to the ground, she was gone. Yet her voice echoed through the air. I will give you until the morning of the festival to answer me. Ba, ba, ba. That's the end of chapter 4. It was a really good chapter. And then chapter 5 is the dilemma. The dilemma. That's probably backwards. Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying the story. Like I said, I love Beldagar and his character. And I like Rose too. But you see both of them, both Beldagar and Rose in book 3 is where you get another glimpse of them. Actually, they're in book 4 too, so you can enjoy that as well. Anyway, I hope everyone will go onto Amazon or to my website and support me by buying those 2 books. Or if you haven't started my book series, you need to start with this one. A New Recruit. And it won a pretty little award. I'm super proud of it. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me and listening to the story and all your support. I hope that everyone is okay, doing well, and that you will be having a fabulous Thanksgiving next week, either with family or just friends. But as for the next chapter, I will get on and read tomorrow, and I hope you guys are all anxiously awaiting it. Okay, thanks. Bye.